Welcome to Chat with the Mayor. I'm William Bill Edwards, the mayor of the great city of South Fulton, here with two exciting people from the city to talk about the topic of use of force. With me today is our police chief, Meadows, and one of the most outstanding city council, I won't say city council, county city managers in the region, Mr. Odie Donald. How are you guys doing?
Just fine. Thank you so much for having us, Mayor.
We're glad to have you all because, there's been a lot of talk about police reform and defunding police departments, and people want to hear what we're doing in our city. And we have a very unique city because most of our citizens are African-American. They've been looking at things and been really mad at the things they've seen. And we've been good in our city because our position is that we believe that any protest that is not violent, we welcome to our city, and our police department does a good job of helping that. I will announce before we start today that as the mayor of the city of South Fulton, I signed President Obama's Mayor's Challenge. And that challenge has 4 aspects to it. And Chief, I know you're probably familiar with it. One is to review the use of force policy. Second, to engage the community, report your findings, and inform your communities as to the results of your police force and what they're doing. I signed that today, Chief. Right. And this really starts that motion. He's asking all the mayors to go ahead on and sign, so I signed it this morning. So let's get started. Mr. Donald, I just want, before we go farther with these questions, Mr. Donald is an integral part of our city. He runs this city in terms of making sure the policies and everything that comes down from our city council are being implemented. And Mr. Donald, just talk briefly about, what this police force has meant to us and the kind of direction you think we're going.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, Mayor, we started off without, really having a police chief and integrated Fulton County's police into the fabric of the city of South Fulton. And so we started off, I think much more smoothly than people would think, but leaving a lot of things up to chance. And so since Chief Meadows has joined the team, not only have we been able to look at I know he's looked at the use of force policy, but he's also looked at the chase policy, how we integrate technology, ensuring that everyone that joins our police force understands his vision for community policing, which is in line with your vision and the council's vision. And I think that we're on, a really good and strong track of continuous quality improvement. I've seen, since Chief Meadows has come in, not only have I seen crime decrease substantially, but also our response times and also just the feeling of safety within our community, which kind of matches the data. But even with that, I think we had some correspondence today where there are different vendors who are interested in providing services to the city that range from everything from looking at how do we improve our responses to violence, how do we prepare people a little bit better, and education and training, which aligns with everything Chief Meadows is doing. And so not only am I excited about having him as a part of the team, but also the direction that we're going. And I'll just close in saying, you see a lot of things happening in Atlanta and Minnesota and a variety of different places. That's not South Fulton. And I think it's important to understand while we're prepared and responding to people, South Fulton is a very special place where we're building off a blank canvas. And I think under the leadership of both yourself and Chief Meadows, we're going in the right direction.
Good, we appreciate that because the administration of the city plays an integral part in making sure that we meet those requirements. Chief, let's dive into some of these questions. And first one I want to ask you is what are your thoughts about what you've seen over the past weeks?
This has been one of the most challenging times in the 34 years that I've been in law enforcement. But I think it's important for us to understand that people really want their voices to be heard. And I don't think that that's been happening systemically throughout this country. And a lot of that is boiling over in the frustrations that we're seeing right now. And so I think it's important that we take into consideration the voices of our community so that they'll we'll be able to better understand the values that they want to see in policing, so that as we move forward, our communities would have had a hand in helping us shape not only the city of South Fulton Police Department, but policing in general throughout this country. And that's going to be important. We sit down and we talk about millennials right now. Millennials want to be valued. They want to know that their voices have been heard. And so it's important for us not only to talk about our older population, but sitting down with our young people and seeing what sort of values they would like to see in policing as well. I think that's going to be extremely important for us as we move forward.
I agree with you, Chief. And I've been talking to some young folk, Marcus Coleman and other folk about, just tell me how you feel. Make suggestions, be a part of the fabric of what we're trying to do. And on that note, Chief, one of the questions was, what have been how have we protected people in our city in protests, and have we had any issues?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't hear that.
Have we protected our people during protests, and have we had any issues?
No, we haven't had any issues. As you know, on yesterday, Mayor, we had a protest that went straight down Old National. It was a very peaceful protest. The police department played an integral role in helping to organize that, because we understand the need for people to vent their frustrations and be able to talk about what they're seeing nationally. And I had some really interesting conversations with a lot of people out there at the protest yesterday. Some very good and some very bad. They just feel like some police departments should be completely dismantled. While I know that's not the course that needs to be taken, I also understand the need to be able to reach out to our community, hear them, and make sure that those values are incorporated into the City of South Fulton Police Department.
Well, we join you in the fact that we don't look at this whole issue of dismantling the police department. I don't think that that's the right thing to do. But I want to add that, let me thank the coordinators of the protest on yesterday on Old National. It was very nice. It was to the point. We had our police department there. We had Parks and Recreation people, and we had no incidents. And that goes to show you, in the city of South Fulton, we welcome peaceful protests at any time you want to come, because we want to give people an opportunity to express their beliefs and their ideas, as long as you do it peacefully. Chief, another question for you is that, so what justifies use of force? And take us through what an officer may face.
You know what, Mayor, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
The question is, what justifies a use of force? And take us through what an officer may face.
So here's the thing. All of the policies, or when I first came to the city of South Fulton, one of the things I did was I reviewed each one of our policies to make sure they mirror case law. What I would encourage all of our citizens to do is to go back and take a look at Graham versus Connor, Vamp, Graham versus Connor, and Tennessee versus Gardner. Those two pieces of legislation and case law actually shape what the use of force is within this country. It's not just the city of South Fulton, but this is a Supreme Court case law that actually shapes that. And see, what I did when I first came over was I made sure that our policies mirrored those Supreme Court cases. And so what we look for is whether or not that use of force is reasonable, and whether or not it's proportional to the resistance that's being shown to the officer who's ultimately trying to effect an arrest in those cases. And so if the use of force is deemed justified, then there's no action taken. We have a use of force board in the city of South Fulton, where we have our training director, our SWAT commander, the Office of Professional Standards is there, and then we have some people from our patrol division that participate in that. And every use of force incident, they sit down and review them. Sometimes they'll recommend training for our police officers or our investigators that have to use force. Sometimes they'll recommend that nothing be done. If we find that there's a violation of policy, then we'll go back and we'll look at what that violation is, and we'll administer discipline proportional to that violation. And so we want to make sure that we're consistent in our approach to that, and we have done that. That's one of the reasons that we've implemented the Office of Professional Standards within the police department. We look at how many times our police officers use their taser, how many times they use their baton, and then we see if there's a discernible pattern associated with a particular employee. If we find that, then we'll go back and we'll try to figure out whether or not that employee needs to be retrained, whether or not that employee needs to be harshly disciplined, or whether or not we really have to separate that employee from the police department. But those are all things that we take into consideration, and we do that through that process. So
do you think that there's an opportunity on those boards for community people to be engaged?
Well, I think there would be a huge difference between a civilian review board and the use of force board within the police department. If we had a civilian review board, I would love to see it independent of the police department. I would not have a problem with citizens sitting on that panel, but what you want to do is create the air of transparency as much as you can throughout the police department so that we can start to build that sense of trust and legitimacy that's needed within the police department. And so we would not be opposed to that, but I also can see where our citizens right now want to see a civilian review board looking at all of our use of force incidents.
And that's one of our later questions. We're really going to get back to that. But everybody talks about force and the use of force. This question asks, what are the other options rather than the use of force?
So we use de-escalation techniques. We make sure that each City of South Fulton police officer has to go through community policing training, and they have to go through de-escalation training and use of force training every year. That's mandatory, and that's without fail. And so far, we have had no police officers that have failed to achieve that. But we're also sending each one of our police officers through crisis intervention training also to make sure that we're able to identify when people are in a mental health crisis so that we'll be able to adjust our strategies in dealing with those particular calls as we're going through our 911 operations. And so that's extremely important. We want to make sure that we give all of our police officers the tools that they need to be able to bring a potential use of force situation back under control even before it gets to that point. That's always our preference, to resolve issues in that manner. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen that way.
Well, I'm glad to know that you're doing this extensive training to all our officers. However, there's one question that says, would you think that training in the recent cases would have prevented some of this action that took place?
So when I look at the situation that happened in Minneapolis, I think no amount of training would have changed who and what that police officer is as a person. That police officer there lacked the compassion for human life. He literally put his knee on this individual's neck and squeezed the life out of him. You can't train a person to have compassion for human life. That's one thing. There's another thing that I see in policing. In some situations, I see where police officers aren't exercising what I call emotional intelligence. In other words, if you look at what police officers, let's say within the city of Atlanta, for instance, have gone through over the past 20 to 24 days, it's difficult for the same police officer or a group of police officers to be exposed to an environment where you have rocks and bottles and in some cases knives thrown at you, and consistently exercise the highest degree of emotional intelligence. It's important that you make sure that you're rotating your officers through that scenario. Even when we sent our police officers down to assist the city of Atlanta, we sent them for 2 days. We brought them back for a day, gave them the opportunity to decompress. Then we sent them back, and then we brought them back after the National Guard came in. I think that it's important when we talk about the health and wellness of law enforcement officers throughout this country that we recognize some of the things that we're asking them to do and take some ownership of that also. You saw for the first 5 or 6 days within the city of Atlanta, there were very few incidences involving the police. After about 6 or 7 days, that emotional intelligence started breaking down somewhat. And so the real question becomes, were we exercising as a profession the highest degree of emotional intelligence during that time? And what part and how much ownership does leadership have to take in the amount of time that those officers were left in that environment?
Mhm. Well, another question that comes up that I've gotten here is that has to do with training, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, most counties require 2 to 3 years of education and training.
Right.
What are our requirements as it pertains to that?
Well, right now, as you know, our police officers, you have to have a high school education. One of the things that we're doing is we're very deliberate in our attempt to recruit college educated police officers. And why is that? Studies have shown that police officers with college degrees tend to get fewer complaints over the course of their career, that problem solving skills are heightened as a result of the leadership skills that they develop as they're going through college. We've made it a preference within the South Fulton Police Department that as we begin to promote individuals up our ranks, they're going to have a certain degree of college education to make that happen. And so we're going to continue to raise those standards, as an organization. We're going to continue to set that bar really high. We've, after we made that announcement that was our preference, we had quite a few of our police officers that went out and enrolled back in college, which is what we want from our people, because that tends to spark ideas on ways that we could better develop this organization. And those are the sort of people that we want, people that's willing to invest in themselves and their education and their careers.
Just to piggyback on that, this question says, I understand taking action is not just your responsibility, but us as a community. Please provide information, reference next steps that the city of South Fulton would take towards this action. I'm seeking to provide the community support to make this happen.
Well, we've talked about that. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to continue to build relationships in our communities. We've done a very good job of that in the city of South Fulton, building and leveraging a network of relationships throughout this city. But what we want more than anything is, as we move forward, is to start educating our community on our crime statistics and how we use those crime patterns and trends to help drive crime down. Let me tell you what that'll do for us. It'll make for a better 911 system. When people are calling in, they'll be able to identify those patterns and trends as they develop. They'll be able to relay that information to us in a timely fashion from when they see them, when they see those patterns initially start. And that's important for us because we want to make sure that we're getting accurate and timely information from our communities. But it's only going to happen when our communities have that sense of trust and legitimacy in this police department, that they could pass that information along to us, one, and that we'll respond and act upon it, second.
Well, I know a lot of our citizens know our police officers, especially Cotton Tukes and people like that who are on your COPS program. And I think it's very important that they're not only talking to people and educating them, but bringing back information from the people that make our force better. The question is, has the city considered creating a community citizens review board to evaluate complaints, allegations involving the excessive use of force?
That's certainly something that we will consider, and we're not opposed to that. We report all of our use of force incidences. We don't have an issue with making those incidences public. We certainly invite our citizens to take a second look, even after our board and after our Office of Professional Standards takes a look at it, just so our citizens will know even some of the challenges that confronts our police officers every day. A lot of times people say, well, I don't believe that some of our citizens engage our police in that way all the time. We have some challenges just carrying out our 911 operations every day. And I think that would give our citizenry a better idea of what our police officers go through every day and ways that they can recommend to us as an agency to help reduce those sort of incidences.
And you have to be careful, I think, too. We've talked about this, you and I, citizens, you know, in the way of investigation.
Right.
Not intentionally, but
Right.
in the way of investigation. Talk to us a little more about that.
So, investigations sometimes can be kind of delicate. If you put the wrong type of information out, it can hinder a particular type of investigation. And those are the sort of things that we want to guard against, because if you put the information out and it ruins an investigation, or it makes it impossible for us to get to the truth or the crux of a situation, then people instantly think, oh, they're covering it up. Well, that's not something that we engage in the city of South Fulton Police Department. We're as transparent as we can be, but at the same time, our main interest is to make sure that we get to justice. I teach our investigators all the time that our investigations are supposed to free people just like they're supposed to convict people. We're fact finders. We present the facts before the public and before the courts, and the determination is made based on those facts. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're as thorough and as methodical as you possibly can be in your approach to those types of investigations, and making sure that you're as transparent as you can be, to the extent that you don't damage the integrity of the investigation itself.
I wanted to bring that point up because as you and I talked about Citizen Review Board, I never thought about the issue of interference in investigations. Mm-hmm. I think that's pivotal in what we do. Should the police department mission statement include clear and direct language condemning police brutality?
So what our mission statement says is that we are going to embody 21st century policing models, the 21st century policing model. If you look through the 21st century policing document that was developed by President Obama's task force, yes, it talks about the integrity. It talks about the need to be transparent. If we do all of those things as outlined in that document, there would not be a need to mention police brutality, because you've set those expectations within your organization. You're monitoring those. You're getting with your citizens. You're looking over a lot of the use of force incidences, and you're developing strategies to reduce potentially use of force situations. And so it would be better, in my opinion, to have a mission statement that talks about where we want to be as an organization, where we want to be as a city, and where we want to model policing for the rest of this country, and how we want to model policing for the rest of this country. That's, being a brand new city, we get the opportunity to be a model for policing throughout this nation. And so I would much rather our mission statement speak to that as a goal for this city and this organization.
Okay. This next question, I think, is very relevant because it goes back to the old adage of officer friendly,
right,
that we used to have. And the question is, what about law enforcement mentoring programs for community youth? This could foster positive relationships and distinguish the new law enforcement profession as a role model.
Mayor, that's so important. You heard me mention earlier about sitting down and talking to our youth and being able to find out what values they want to see in this police department, but also getting to these young people where they're at very early ages and making sure that we have positive interactions with our youth. The council in your wisdom, and the mayor in your wisdom, you allowed us to start a park ranger program where our park rangers are in the parks. One of our goals with that program was to try to increase our positive encounters with our youth. We're right now looking at the potential of developing a police athletic league. I would like to do one regionally where we cooperate with other police departments so that we can bring kids from the South Fulton region together and possibly even compete under several different scenarios. We're in the research phase of that right now. We also have one of our sergeants that's been interested in creating a cadet program to try to help mentor young kids that ultimately want to grow up to be police officers, so that we can start to instill those values in them at a very early age. I've heard that consistently from our citizens, And those are the sort of things that we're in the process of developing within the police department. We're just not where we want to be right now.
We talked about use of force, and I'm glad to know that people can hear the kinds of internal things that you have going to measure things like use of force. I don't think people realize that.
Right.
But just a little bit, what is, in a nutshell, what is our use of force policy?
So, as I said earlier, it mirrors the use of force case law for Graham versus Connor, and it's really to use only that force that's necessary to effect an arrest. Now, it's about 8-9 pages long, but in a nutshell, if you exceed that use of force that was necessary to effect that arrest, that's when we start to sit down and take a look at it as an administration. We want to make sure that our officers are going about their jobs the right way every day, and that we're giving them the proper tools to get that done also.
This next question, I think, is pretty good. It talks about, are you looking to change the police officers? Are you looking at the system? Or are we looking to change the people?
Change the people or the system?
They didn't say system. It said, are you looking to change the police officers?
So what we're looking at, absolutely, we want to, but when I say change them, we want to develop our police officers. And I would say it in that way so that as they're going through, we want to make sure we're empowering our police officers to solve problems at the very basic level. And so what we're looking at them doing is engaging more in the problem-oriented policing along with community-oriented policing, so that before problems make it up the chain of command to me as the police chief, we're empowering our police officers to do that at the very basic levels of the organization. And to do that, we have to start developing leaders internally. And if we start to develop them from a leadership standpoint, then they'll take ownership of those problems at the very basic level. And when they solve them, they'll report up the chain of command how they were able to go about solving them and how we could avoid those types of situations as we move forward. So to the extent that I would say change, I would use the word develop.
Okay.
Man,
we talked a little bit about, before you came on, we talked a little bit about mentoring police and youth. And I know, Mr. Don, that you and I, I've come from the place where I believe in mentoring youth and having youth programs. And you and I have talked about that. Can you talk to us a little bit more, even beyond policing, other programs that we can do to mentor our youth?
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of everything we're doing, Mayor. And more than just talking about it with how we're only focusing on a specific population, I think the chief hit the nail on the head that we're trying to develop our staff, but we're also trying to develop our community. So, folks want to have access to, the parks and recreations and programming, but, we've had some instances where those things weren't necessarily given the attention when the entire county was under the auspices of Fulton County and not so much the city of South Fulton. So the Park Ranger program is a direct response to that. Allows people to have access to the parks. They're able to feel secure, but they also, have someone who can clearly provide them support and access, even if, let's say, the park recreation facility isn't open. So these park rangers are dual staff members. They're there to kind of assist with the day-to-day operations and support people just as much as they are policemen. I also think that we put some things in place, whether it's our internship program, that many of them are only accessible for Fulton County City of South Fulton residents. We've added some different access points for people to really just access government, whether it be small businesses who we've put aside $250,000 for them to have mentorship, loans, and other access to capital programs, so that we're developing our businesses in our city and our community so that they reflect the vision of our citizens and then our mayor and council. And so when we make these decisions on community policing, it really should be said that it's the community, the delivery of services to the community throughout South Fulton. So we've got community policing, community zoning, community fire. Everything is based on being responsive to our citizens and delivering a government that they want. And that's where our mentorship programs, our internship programs, our police and fire activities, even the C-Click fix and the ability to give access to residents to deliver services and manage work orders. We want a community that is really connected to government, which isn't like anywhere else we've seen in the world. And so very early in that process, only 3 years old, but I think we're making some very large and quick steps on a daily basis.
And that goes a long way to create to our vision of, delivering good service. And that's what government is about. It's all about delivering service, whether it be fire, police, whatever the case may be. That's what people pay taxes for, and we're obligated to do that. Did you have anything else? I think you were trying to say something before, Mr. Donald.
Yeah, I just think, when we look at how we invest in our police officers, and there's some things that, Chief probably, can't always say, but, these decisions are very strategic and tactical. So, it's important that they have the tools that they need. I know that the Bearcat was something that was controversial when we ordered our police cars and the number of cars that we ordered and things like that, even raising the police salaries. But I think it's been very pertinent from the chief, and one of his priorities that he has the most educated, the most focused, the most prepared police officers in the country, not just in the city of South Fulton. And I think, he's advocated for them, but it's more so he's advocating for the citizens. And I don't want that to really get lost. Everything is about, at the end of the day, how do we decrease response times? How do we increase the service to our citizens and really make people not only feel safe, but ensure they're safe? And so I think it's very important that when he talks about those things, we keep it in context that we're 100% focused on responding to our citizens through our police and every other aspect of government.
Absolutely. Chief, obviously somewhere you went to speak and you mentioned mindfulness training.
Right.
Someone heard that and they want you to expand a little bit on that.
So you heard me mention earlier, and I was talking about, emotional intelligence and being able to respond to those things and understanding where our police officers are emotionally. If you look at the 21st century policing model put in place by President Obama's task force, one of the things they talked about was the threat of the health and wellness of police officers throughout this country. Well, that also cuts to their mental health as well. And so I always use this analogy or this story to tell when I talk about mindfulness training, Mayor. I had a police officer that I had to fire, not in the city of South Fulton, but at another organization, where he had gone to a domestic call. And in that domestic call, he got in there and the wife was beaten up. And when he told the husband he was under arrest, he had a really bad physical altercation with the husband. And it took him a long time to get the handcuffs on. And then when he finally got them on, the wife jumped on his back. Well, the officer was still in the mindset that he was fighting with a man. And when I looked at the body camera video, I said, there's no way on earth we can keep this police officer on this force. Well, I took that as a professional failure also, because it's important for us to give our police officers the tools to be able to navigate from one situation to the next emotionally and be able to understand where they are emotionally. And so mindfulness resiliency-based training does just that. It helps you to understand in that very moment where you are in terms of an emotional state, and you're able to adjust your behavior accordingly. Because the wife immediately jumped on his back, he wasn't able to hit that reset button in his mind to try to scale back his response to the physical altercation that he was ultimately engaged in. And so those are the sort of things that we have to be mindful of. There's a clear distinction between some of the things that we're seeing nationally and what we saw in Minneapolis. Now, we know that there are racist police officers in policing. My job as a police chief is to find those people, get them out of policing, and see them in jail if I can, right? But then also to make sure for those police officers that might not be emotionally in tune to where they are in that spectrum, it's important for me to give them that sort of training so that they'll know how to de-escalate themselves so that they can de-escalate a situation. And so I mentioned it earlier, if you expose police officers to protesters for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days for 12 hours a day with no relief, they're not going to exercise the highest degree of emotional intelligence. And so training your mind to understand where you are emotionally is going to be really important for us. I've been advocating for mindfulness, resiliency-based training within the profession, and I'm going to keep doing that until we're able to get a curriculum developed, particularly for police officers.
I think all of us understand too the split-second decision type of atmosphere they're in.
Right.
And have to be able to make that decision. Sometimes that split-second decision not only hurts them, but the entire community if they don't make it right. So I think I get it when you talk about mindfulness and training. Let's get to a great question that everybody want to know about. And that has to do with de-escalation training. And
right. So de-escalation training, I mentioned it earlier. Every city of South Fulton police officer has to go through that and use of force training. And being able to talk about ways to de-escalate situations, particularly as it relates to a mental health crisis, is extremely important also. We have a large population within the Atlanta region, people that are suffering from mental health issues. And if we don't give our police officers those tools to be able to navigate through those circumstances, then trying to de-escalate a situation with a person that's suffering from a mental health crisis, it's going to be a moot point. And so making sure that we have that training readily accessible. Right now, we have every police officer is going through it. It's a week-long course. The state puts it on. We are a very new city, getting everybody through it. It's going to take a little bit of time. But what we're doing in the short term is making sure when we have those sort of situations that we're sending people that already have had the training in an effort to try to show how we can reduce those situations of use of force, and just how we talk to people. Sometimes just the way you get out of your patrol car and the way you approach someone can send the wrong or right message to a person who might be coming into a situation, a heightened situation. As an African-American man, anytime blue lights get behind me, even to this day, my heart starts beating fast. And Mayor, I'm a chief of police, but if I'm coming into a situation here as a citizen and a police officer is coming in just above me, there's really not anywhere for us to go. And so there is a lot of angst in the population. And so de-escalation becomes more critical to the profession as we move forward. And we need to make sure that our police officers understand that. People keep saying, well, you don't have a problem in South Fulton. No, we don't. But the nature of policing dictates that something's going to happen. I mean, that's the nature of policing. How we respond to that as an agency and as a city will be how we will be judged, after those use of force incidences take place. And so we keep addressing that with our people, making sure that our use of force and our de-escalation is proportional to what we're seeing nationally. And we want to make sure that our people, they get it. Our people get it. But we also want to make sure that that emotional intelligence aspect is there as well.
And on your list of priorities in terms of education, we just talked about de-escalation. How important is that training to your organization?
It's right at Mayor, it's at the very top of my priority list. I think creating one of the things I wanted to do when I first came in, I wanted to sit down and look at our policies, those policies that make us most vulnerable as an agency. Use of force was one. The chase policy was another. We have to sit down and take a look at I'm rewriting our disciplinary policy as we speak. I've spent the past 2 months just combing over our disciplinary protocols and our policies, and I expect to get that out before the body soon, so that we can sit down and look at the structure that we want to put in place. But that training has to be right now at the top of my list, and making sure that we're adequately training our police officers. Now, having said that, I understand that we're still in the pandemic and training has been kind of hampered to some degree when we talk about it. But we want to make sure that when the time is right and the circumstances are optimal, that we get our people through that and we get them through it post haste.
Well, you mentioned another issue that people may not understand. Talk to me a little bit about chasing.
Chasing?
We have a non-chase policy. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, and as I look back over the course of, I've been in law enforcement for 3 decades. There was a time, Mayor, where we would chase till the wheels fall off a car. But we're not in that time anymore. And so our citizens have spoke loud and clear that engaging in high-speed car chases until somebody wrecks and people die is not worth pursuing a stolen car. And as a profession, we agree with that. We need to start figuring out ways, different techniques, the utilization of technology to try to prevent police officers from engaging in that sort of activity. We can chase under certain circumstances where there's been a forcible felony committed. Certainly if we have a murder suspect, someone that just committed a murder, our police officer and the police arrive on scene, they're able to engage in pursuits of that type of a situation or any type of forcible felony. Or where a vehicle's been involved in a multiple crime spree where it's been terrorizing a particular neighborhood, they're able to engage in pursuit from that. But just somebody's running because their license is suspended, or somebody running simply because they were in a stolen car, we don't feel that that's worth someone's life. It was one of the first policies I sat down and looked at. Unfortunately, we did have a situation before I was able to change that policy early on in my tenure. And that's unfortunate, but that's kind of where we are.
You know, in my time as an elected official, I've learned that getting a police officer is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
To fill those, you would think that, you know, people say we need 20 positions and we got them, but you can't find 20 people out of 100. And true. Talk to me a little bit about the hiring process and how stringent is it?
So right now we have about 700 applications in the city of South Fulton. We're not hurting for people wanting to come to the city of South Fulton Police Department, but certainly as we comb through those 700, out of those 700 applications, we might find 30 or 40 that we will consider even bringing into the police department. We sit down and we look at some automatic disqualifiers. We look at a person's criminal history. We look at a person's work history. We look at their credit rating. Obviously, there's a lot of temptation in law enforcement with respects to monies and things of that nature. And people that are not responsible when it comes to their own finances are people that tend to be irresponsible within the profession. And so in most cases, those are automatic disqualifiers for us. And so we'll go through that process as we get applications in. Then we'll go through a physical agility test with because we also want our police officers to be physically fit and able to perform the job. That's one of the reasons that we're going to be looking at a wellness program for our officers right now that are currently within the organization. And after they go through that physical agility test, then we start digging into their background. We'll start looking at, talking to neighbors. We'll start talking to old employers. We'll even go back in some cases and talk to college teachers to see what type of student they were, or high school teachers to see what type of student they were. Were they responsible? Were they leaders in their respective areas of study? And so those are all the sort of things that we'll look at. And then we go through a psychological profile also. One part of our psychological profile is written, and the other part is with the actual psychologist. In that written part of the psychological, we'll get a report back from the psychologist that tell us the likelihood that this person will be with the organization 5 to 10 years from now. Why is that important for us? Because over the course of a year, we will have invested almost $100,000 in a new recruit, getting them trained and out on the street. You don't want to lose that investment after a 2-year period. That's a bad investment. And so one of the things that we look at in our psychological profile is what's the likelihood that this person will be with your organization 5, 10, or maybe even 15 years from now. And the very last one is the physical, where we send them before a doctor, and then a physical test, and drug screening and things of that nature is done as well.
Okay, appreciate it. And just as a side item, if you had 100 applications, say, Chief, 100 applications you said you would have.
Right.
Percentage of them you think would actually pass muster to become a police officer?
We might get about 8, maybe 9. If it's a really good batch, 10 out of that 100. Okay. Believe it or not, with the automatic disqualifiers, you'll get 30% of those that'll get knocked out just in the automatic disqualifier. Here's
a question. Can a resident clause be added where an officer must be in the area, he or she, that they patrol for a minimum of 6 months? They believe providing better results and handling conflicts within the community. Right.
Well, we're going to an 18 beat design. And I've spoken with the head of our patrol commander, Major Griffin. And as we go through, one of the things we will see are regular beat officers. Why is that important? It breeds familiarity in the area. It gives us the opportunity to see which beat officers are most effective in terms of being able to build relationships first and being able to reduce crime second. And so those are all the sort of things that we'll sit down and take a look at. We have implemented a ComStat model of policing where we sit down and we look at statistical data. Well, we'll drill down even further down to every one of those 18 beats to see how effective a particular beat officer is, or if we need a particular type of beat officer with a certain skill set in a particular area. And so those are all of the sort of things that we'll look at, but we won't be able to get to that space until we're able to fill that 18 beat design that we talk about. Why? Because when the Georgia Tech study came about, we found out that our police officers were spending 11.5 hours out of their 12-hour shift doing nothing but responding to E911 calls. That number has to come down, Mayor, in order for our police officers to engage in more community related policing, proactive policing strategies. And so you really ideally only want your police officers 1/3 of their time dedicated to handling 911 calls. The rest of that should be dedicated to proactive policing strategies. And so we're not there yet, but we're certainly moving in that direction.
Okay, here's a question that I don't really like to answer about, but you're the chief, I'm gonna let you do it. The question is, how many police officers do we have with the city of South Fulton?
154. Listen, here's the reason I don't mind answering that question. It's because we started off with 87 when I first got here. We're at 154 now. My hope is that before this next budget cycle goes into effect, we'll be at 178. And so that'll put us a little bit closer to fulfilling our 18 beat design. We still won't be there, but we'll be much closer to being able to achieve that goal. And so making incremental steps and making sure that our police department is growing organically is really important, and making sure that we're building those relationships as we grow.
Keeping in mind that you may have 700 applications, which you may get a small percentage of it each year to come to the police department.
Right.
Cadets do we have in the training right now?
I'm sorry?
How many cadets do we have in training right now? How many recruits?
We have a total of 14 right now between, well, as you know, Mayor, they suspended the academy because of COVID-19. And so the cadets, the 8 cadets that we had in class have come back, and they'll start back, I believe, at the end of this month. And then the rest are in field training. And so we should have about 14 police officers hitting the street sometime around October or November, which helps us to, also fulfill that desire to get those beats filled.
Talk to us also about, there are a number of beats within your police department, a number of organizations. You got narcotics, you got other things. Talk to us about how it is broken up in your police department.
So when I first came in, we didn't really have a divisional structure. It was just patrol and detectives. Well, what we wanted to do was create divisions within the police department, and we created 4 different divisions. One is patrol, which is the largest portion of the police department. That's where all of our E911 operations occur. Where our E911 operations occur. Then we have the special, the criminal investigations division, which is where our detectives are. Our crime scene personnel is there. We have our report review section where all of the reports are processed within the police department. And we also have other little intelligence. Our intelligence unit is over there as well. And then we have our special operations division, which is the gang unit, narcotics, assets forfeiture, SWAT is over there. Our K9 units are over there. Those are all of the units that do more of the proactive policing strategies. In fact, our narcotics unit has hit, I believe, a little over 21 drug warrants this year, where we've gone and been able to shut down drug houses throughout the city of South Fulton. And what that does for us, in a lot of those areas where those drug houses are, you see a large amount of violent crime occurring in those areas. Well, that's one of the reasons we're starting to see a reduction in our violent crime rate, particularly in those areas where we have a lot of drug activity.
The question is it possible to restart the Coffee with the Cop program in District 7, preferably near Old National and 138?
Absolutely. It hadn't gone anywhere. The pandemic kind of put a halt on a lot of those events. We love those events. We've had the opportunity to hear from a lot of our citizens at a Coffee with the Cop events, and we certainly expect that as the pandemic lifts, that we'll get back to doing those.
Yeah, this next question is one that you and I have talked about several times, and with the school board, and the thought of bringing back the Truancy program, which as a county commissioner I introduced years ago. But I know that COVID and other things has gotten in the way. But talk to us a little bit. I'm for that 100%. I think it worked when we did it, and I think it's something that needs to come back.
Here's where the police department can help with truancy. The state took police department's ability to enforce truancy away, and there's a program that's CHIN's Child in Need of Services. I think what's important for us as a police department, as a city, that we engage in that process as much as we can to have those positive interactions with our youth. One of the things I found out in talking with a lot of chronically truant kids is that many of them aren't even going to school every day because they don't have clean clothes to wear every day. And that's particularly problematic. And being able to help those youth just build the capacity to go to school every day can be a daunting task, but also making sure that we're taking them out of harm's way from just riding around on the streets of South Fulton in the middle of the day where it could potentially be dangerous, getting them off the streets and making sure that we're engaged with our schools in a very meaningful way is going to be important for us. And so I'm all for, the truancy program coming back in. And that's one thing that you and I, Mayor, have talked about. And it's one thing that we've actually taken steps towards putting in place within the city of South Fulton.
Right. This is a question I think that I don't know how many people know about the police academy, Citizens Police Academy that we're talking about. But it says, is there a way to simulate what an officer goes through when they are faced with the decision to use force? And I think this is a lot where the police academy can come in and assist in doing that.
And that's one of the things that we'll sit down and take a look at. Yeah, it's important for citizens to see. We do things that are called shoot, don't shoot, where there's a video that goes up on this screen, and you get the
Yeah.
opportunity to decide whether or not you want to shoot. Believe it or not, 99% of the citizens that engage in that exercise fail. Or either that or they wind up getting shot themselves, because it's a situation where, you know, you have to decide in a split second whether or not you're going to discharge your weapon. And I think it's important for people to see that and experience that. We had one young lady in Citizens Police Academy. The situation was so real to her, it actually brought her to tears because she didn't know whether or not she should actively engage in a use of force under those circumstances. And so I think the more we educate our citizens around those types of scenarios, I think the better off we'll be as a profession, and we'll be able to explain and talk about the de-escalation tactics more meaningfully in our public conversations.
Yeah, this next question has to do with, of course, the police headquarters on Old National Highway, and I think the one that we're building, and it's a public safety building. I want to make people understand that, which includes the police department, but will be in there. The courts definitely will be in there. It's a public safety building. Right now, where we are is we've done the architectural design. We've had some for whatever reason, but I understand now that they're working on electrical in there, and we're moving forward. And we were able to trim off, Chief, I hadn't told you that, a month or so off of the delivery times. So we're fast tracking it. So talk a little bit about what your expectations in the new police headquarters on Old National.
Well, we're really excited about that, Mayor. I think that it's important for us to have the appropriate footprint along the Old National Corridor. 60% of our police operations happen along that Old National Corridor, all the way out through to District 7. When we sit down and look at the number of E911 calls that we answer just along that corridor, it's a massive amount of our operation. And so having the appropriate footprint over there is going to be really important. We're excited about moving in over there and making sure that we develop the right relationships along Old National as well. And so it's my hope that we're able to move in sooner rather than later. I'm glad to hear we were able to shave a month off because having that facility is going to do wonders for our ability to build those relationships and bringing people into that particular headquarters so that they could be part, so that the headquarters could be part of the community also.
Mr. Donald? Mr. Donald, you back?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
We were talking about the police headquarters, the public safety training facility on Old National.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been involved with that intricately from day to day. Tell us where we are.
Yes, I mean, I think we have worked with the owner over there to not only accelerate on our side the construction, but also to kind of get some relief on the pricing. I think everyone in the community, whether it be the landowner, our citizens, and maybe just as important, our businesses, are excited about having an accelerated police presence. I think the chief has kind of mentioned we're already on Old National at the temporary headquarters that we have now, but we're looking at about a month or so being taken off of the overall construction process. I think the chief and also our court administrator have both kind of worked together to identify what services we need in there from day one. And then if we were to go into a phase 2 to really bring all of our operations for public safety over there, what would that look like? And so I think phase 1, we're able to shave off about a month or so. I don't have those construction times in front of me, but it was around, I think, 9.5 months. I think now it's closer to about 7 with that start date being a couple of weeks ago. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Most importantly, we're kind of saving money, but also delivering what police need to be able to operate in a centralized location. Chief, don't you have about 3 locations now? I think you're kind of trying to operate out of, forensics or whatnot in one place, operations in another, just kind of spread out. And so centralizing them will help them kind of operate a little bit better. So it's going to be a very big deal for the city. And even in our first 3 years, having a home for our police in one of the areas that needs it the most is very important. Although Mayor, your mini precincts and, you know, something that we started even before the chief got here that he's kind of doubled down on and expanded is something that's, you know, I'd say equally important to a headquarters because people want to see and feel police in their communities. And so those many precincts don't go away when we bring this headquarters online.
Well, my commitment during that time was to put a mini precinct in every district.
Mm-hmm.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, I think we're only missing one district now, which is District 3.
Right.
We're eyeing a facility over there, and Mr. Donald, he's been integral in helping us get that facility, and you know where it is, Chief. And so we're once all the pandemic stuff is over, we can engage and possibly get that. So that would the commitment will be fulfilled once we get that.
And it's going to take less than 2 years. It's going to take less than 2 years to get that commitment done. That's light speed now.
That's light speed. All right, I got you. Listen, Mr. Donald, I got a question for you.
Okay.
When are the parks opening?
So the council will make a decision on our full reopening plan, hopefully tomorrow during the 10 a.m. meeting. If the plan that I have presented to the council, which is on the COVID-19 page on the website, if it is approved, then we'll have a passive opening of parks, meaning that trails and fields and things of that nature that can be utilized by citizens without support of staff, those things will open about 10 days or within 10 days after July 5th. And so that is the time frame that we currently have, but the council may change it and allow those things to be open immediately. They may want those numbers to take a little bit longer because I think we saw today that Georgia had one of the highest numbers of coronavirus cases on Saturday. We were talking about it earlier. I think it was a single day of about 3,000 or 3,500, which is, or I'm sorry, 3,500 more than they normally had. And so that is a little bit concerning. And I'll tell you, I'm even looking at the plan myself to really make some recommendations to council tomorrow. So when we get off of this call, we'll be convening to kind of talk about those things.
Okay. Chief?
Yes.
So is the taser, and does it justify the use of deadly force?
So some of the things that I've seen in terms of being able to say that a taser is a deadly weapon, I think what we have to be mindful of is that a taser incapacitates you for a period of time. And if a police officer is incapacitated for any period of time, that gives someone access to a deadly weapon. And that's the one thing that we have to be mindful of when we talk about it being a deadly weapon. Is the person using it? Are they trained to use it first? And then what is the effect of that taser and who's actually being tased? Obviously, when we talk about, and as I said, a police officer being tased and incapacitated, you certainly have access to a deadly weapon, among other weapons as well.
Well, I tell you, I had the opportunity last week, Mr. Donald and I visited the roll call, a police roll call around national. I tell you one thing about that, 6 o'clock is a little rough on me, Mr. I had to pray on that, but we did go down there and to talk to people. And Mr. Donald, you want to talk a little bit about that, and I'll jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the purpose behind it was, you know, you're seeing a lot of things happen around the country. And so just as we want to make sure we support our citizens, I think the chief spoke on his participation and many of our staff's participation in the peaceful protests that occurred yesterday. You also want to show support, you know, for your police staff as well. It's just a difficult time right now. Everyone is both a journalist and a judge. And I think we mentioned that during the time. And so the decisions that are made are not only under greater scrutiny now, but rightfully so, because there has been some misconduct in other places. And while that's not the city of South Fulton's way of doing things, it doesn't make us exempt from it. And so I think my thoughts and my purpose on attending that was, one, to show support, but also to set the tone, you know, with great respect to the chief. You know, he reports to me and I report to the council, and the council reports to our citizens. And so that level of accountability can never be forgotten. And so we start with focusing and having a great understanding that regardless of whether these things happen outside of the city of South Fulton is just as accountable as anyone else to our citizens. And we just want to make sure that not only did our staff know and understand that, but they also understand that we do support them and any resources that they need to be able to deliver on this promise to the people is something that we're willing to do. And I think it was a quality gesture, but more important, just something that making sure we're on the same page helps to alleviate any public problems that might arise.
Well, we really want them to know that we support you, when you're doing good. Chief didn't know anything we were coming. Didn't know anything. I don't think the police, nobody knew we were coming.
Yeah.
Some strange city manager called me one day. He said, let's go to a roll call at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And I came back at 6:30 that evening for the change of shift.
Yeah.
Chief, the next day I was at 11 o'clock, I was at the precinct on Button the Road.
Right.
And I tell you, these guys, they weren't intimidated. They were glad to see us. If they had any questions about anything, it was a great deal to go to be able to have that kind of interaction with our police department. And they appreciated it, that someone, the mayor and the city manager actually came up, by the way, got out of their beds and came up to see them. So what was your reaction when they called you, Chief?
Well, it's fun. I'm so proud of our men and women that serve out there every day because they're approachable to anybody and everybody. And so, when they called me, they said, the mayor and the city manager showed up. And I was like, and I guess they thought it was a problem. I said, well, that's great. I said, I didn't even know they were coming. And so, they really appreciated you guys coming out. And I think that's really important that they just not hear it from me and not hear it from the deputy chief, but they hear it from the rest of the leadership within the city of South Fulton and know that they're being supported in a really meaningful way.
And I also think that Councilman Corey Reeves, he did another day. So
right.
that any of us want to be there. Chief, this next question I think is a good one and has to deal mostly with that thing you call mutual aid.
Right.
It was, have you thought about bringing in outside agencies who can provide assistance in these areas? And I think that kind of hints on this whole issue of mutual aid to a degree.
Right. So I've had conversations with Chief Gardner from East Point, Cassandra Jones from Union City, the Fulton County Sheriff's Department, the City of Atlanta. One of the reasons we sent our people to assist the City of Atlanta because if something happened in the city of South Fulton, we certainly want that gesture to be reciprocated. And so whenever there's a need for mutual aid, we certainly want to make sure that we're engaging to that end and making sure that we're sending that message to our partners. Yes, when things happen in the region, the city of South Fulton will be responsive, but we also want that sort of response when things happen. And we've gotten that. Whenever things happen, the Clayton County Sheriff, we have a very good relationship with Sheriff Victor Hill. He's always been open to sending people along with our neighboring jurisdictions as well.
Right. Talk a little bit about jurisdictions and how some of our officers have been sworn in as deputies and what that means.
Right. We've sworn in the Fulton County Sheriffs and the Clayton County Sheriff has actually sworn in some of our personnel, and that allows us to go beyond our borders when problems tend to affect the city of South Fulton outside of our borders. It gives us the opportunity to go and deal with those issues. It also helps a great deal in terms of mutual aid when we're sending people out there that they're not outside operating, without any type of oversight outside of our borders. And so it's been a huge asset for us in the city of South Fulton, and we want to make sure that we keep those relationships strong and that we continue to utilize that as a strategy.
Well, Chief, let's talk about the Bearcat.
Oh,
Known as the armored car.
mm-hmm.
That and our funding anticipations for that.
So I know that people talk about the militarization of police departments, but I want to be perfectly clear. I won't be patrolling down the middle of Old National in a Bearcat. We won't have rifles pointed out the side of portholes and things of that nature. That's not what that Bearcat was designed to be. That Bearcat is actually a rescue vehicle. We have a great relationship with our school police. In the event that something happens at a school, we'll be able to go in and pull people out in active shooter scenarios. We have quite a bit of drug activity and drug houses in South Fulton that we have to try to impact on over the years. There's some drug houses that we've gone in and found an arsenal of weapons. And equipping our police officers with the appropriate tools to go into those circumstances is very important. There was one drug house we went into and we found gas masks in there, along with a large amount of weapons. And so we want to make sure that we're equipping our police officers appropriately to go into those circumstances. But I just want to be very clear that we'll be utilizing that Bearcat primarily as a rescue vehicle and for the safety of our police officers. It's an armored vehicle, no different than the armored cars that we use to have our monies transported from one bank to the next every day. And so I just want to be clear in the use of that. And I'm committed right now to trying to find another funding source for that other than tax dollars, whether it be through grants or whatever the case may be. And so we're going to sit down and take a look at that before the Bearcat is actually finished being built, but it is being built right now. And because of COVID-19, I understand what's happened to our tax base. And so in fairness, one of the things that we're looking at is trying to look at other funding sources for that Bearcat.
Yeah, and I know of one incident wherein that you had to call another city,
Right.
bring in their Bearcat to assist you in what you were doing.
We've actually had quite a few scenarios where that Bearcat would have been beneficial to our officers, where we had to seek assistance from other cities. And so to that end, this will help us build capacity to deal with issues on our own.
And one of them was the incident in Atlanta, where we went
right.
and took our police officer there in one of our vans.
Right, and we had two, a van that was damaged during the protest within the city of Atlanta, and that certainly would have helped out under those circumstances as well.
Who handles 911 calls for the city of South Fulton, and where are calls dispatched?
So right now we contract that service through Fulton County. We've had some challenges there. We've certainly been in the process of researching the possibility of implementing our own E911 center, but it's done from the E911 center in Fulton County. And we've had that IGA and that partnership with them in place since I've been here. But as I said earlier, we're looking at the possibility of implementing our own in time.
Okay. Here's one that it says Cedar Grove, but it could go to all our precincts.
Mm-hmm.
The Cedar Grove precinct closed due to COVID-19 or the recent racial conflicts?
So we closed down the Cedar Grove precinct during COVID-19, and we tried to centralize as many of our operations as we could. Obviously, we're operating on skeleton crews as it relates to precinct operations. The city manager has detailed he's created a really detailed reopening plan, and we certainly expect many of those facilities to come back online in time as COVID begins to lighten up. As you heard the city manager say, I think the past 2 days has been a historic 2 days with respects to COVID-19. And so I don't know how soon that will take place, but certainly I know that the city manager is working on that plan to try to get our services opened up as responsibly as we can and as soon as we can.
So Donna, would you like to speak on that?
No, I mean, I think that the chief is 100% correct. We've got a pretty dynamic team of intelligent folks who've been working on this for a long period of time. I think we've heard from some of our regional partners who believe that we've got a strong plan, and some of them are kind of requesting some technical assistance from the city on ensuring that we help other cities open up in a responsible way as well. So we're very much prepared, but the one thing we've learned since March, when we decided to be one of the first to cease operations, is that day to day this thing changes and we're not totally in control. The governor's office kind of controls many of the things that impact cities. And so the openings that have been decided on by the state that restricts the city from closing to a certain extent, you know, doesn't allow us a lot of leeway. And so as we try to adjust to that and make sure we keep our local control, we've got to be prepared to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and the forces outside of us. And so I think we've given the council as much information as we have and a strong plan. And so now I'm excited that I think our residents have picked a very quality group of elected officials who will make that decision.
Well, earlier you heard me say that I signed the President Obama's Mayor's Challenge.
Yeah,
I need the assistance of both of you all as we try to pull a document together, which the last part of that document has the community input to it, and we can have in our city and say this is our response to Obama's Mayor's Challenge. So I'm going to need the support of both of you in answering those 3 questions and showing what we're doing. I think we're off to a great start.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's nothing that we can't handle. I'm just glad to be a part of it. So we're going to keep pushing that way and make sure that we get that done. But any closing remarks, Chief and Mr. Donald? Yeah. Chief, then I go to Mr. Donald.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Donald. He wants you to go first.
Listen, I'm always glad to kind of join you, Mayor, and talk about all of the great things that are happening in our city, and always excited to work with the chief as well. But I just want people to remember that, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is still going, you know, very strong, actually becoming a more difficult health situation for us to deal with here locally. And as we look and work to create additional police reforms, we want to make sure that we have balance in our very new government. We are definitely having some challenges, but the city of South Fulton was birthed out of challenges. So I'm just really excited that, you know, we're making the progress that we're making and we're fulfilling the desires of our citizens. And so we're committed to that. Our council, our mayor, our police chief, and every member of our staff is committed to fulfilling that vision. So we'll keep working until we get it done.
All right, Chief.
And you know, Mr. Donald, I mean, he said it. We want to make sure that our citizens understand that this police department is being built with the values that they want to see in policing. And so it's important for us to solicit their input. And I love this challenge, Mayor. I love the fact that it forces us to be transparent with everything that we're doing. And so to that end, whatever we need to do to help further that and help build that trust and legitimacy within law enforcement, I'm prepared to do it.
Well, that's good. And let me just say thank you to both of you. I think that you are 2 of the top professionals in what you do. And that's why the city of South Fulton is where it is today. You know, Chief all on ABC and NBC. I look at see that shows you the worthiness of a police chief that we do have. And thank you both for being you, and Mr. Donald being the administrator of all these policies and procedures that come down to you. And you do a fantastic job. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been some information. And guess what? We have answered every question.
Wow.
Us tonight. We didn't leave one question on the table. So I hope that people have a better understanding of what we do, the exciting things that goes on in our police department and in our government, and that you are proud to be a citizen of the city of South Fulton, where you need to be. As always, thank you so much. And guys, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.